Hello, everybody. Bruce from Oregon here with the Bruce from Oregon Show. This is episode 0. It might be the first. It might be the last. Let's find out. Today, I want to do something a little different. I want to start a new series. I want to go over tips and tricks for management BKMs, advice that I have that I've learned over the years that I want to share with you in some different videos. So today, I want to start with the first topic, economy of words. And we're going to go over what does this mean. And I found a masterclass article that offers 10 tips for improving word economy. And we're going to go over that, and I'm going to give you some examples from my real life. And maybe these can help you in whatever domain you're working in, whether that's a hobby or a job or just interacting with other people in real life. Now, this topic came to my mind for two reasons. Number one, we were talking with Dave Neal, who was covering a story related to The Bachelorette, where some ex-girlfriends of a contestant on The Bachelorette were coming out with stories about that contestant on TikTok. And what we discovered was it was taking them quite a while to get to the point and explain exactly what they meant when they were talking about their experience as an ex-girlfriend of this contestant on The Bachelorette. And I realized that these people could have used a lesson in economy of words. Now, number two, in reviewing a particular court case that you may or may not be familiar with, I was reading through some of the motions that the lawyers from each side were writing, and I realized that one of the lawyers was writing motions without too much consideration for economy of words, and could use a lesson in word economy. So for both of these reasons, that's why I decided to make this video at this time. So let's get into it and take a look at the definition of the economy of words. So we have the nice AI overview here because everything has to be AI or your stock price will go down. Let's see. Economy of words is a principle that involves using fewer words to convey a complex message or emotion more clearly and powerfully. It is a fundamental concept in songwriting. It's also used in writing, education, translation, marketing, and branding. So that's nice. Now, this definition, I actually think we could improve this definition that the AI wrote. And by the time we're done with this video, you may have some ideas as well about how to improve this paragraph here. So let's get into the masterclass article that I found with 10 tips for improving the word economy of your writing. We'll go through these one at a time. All right. So let's see. Now, this is written from the perspective of somebody who's going to write a novel, maybe some fiction, like a mystery or a murder mystery or something like that. But I think that the concepts are applicable and translatable to other areas of life that we might find ourselves in, whether that's a job or a hobby or relationships. So let's take a look. Here we go. So again, they start off with what is word economy? And let's see what they have to say here compared to the Google search we just did. In writing, word economy refers to careful management of the words that end up in your text. In the simplest of terms, it means keeping sentences, paragraphs, and chapters as short as they can be without degrading your storytelling or rhetoric. So that's good. And then there's a few tips in here about, we're not trying to count the number of words or characters in a page. It's not about that. It's a little bit more qualitative, but there are rules that we can follow here. So let's get into these. Number one, use the active voice. So when writing in the active voice, the subject of a sentence performs an action. So we could say, the moose ran across the street. And that would hopefully be active voice sentencing. Passive voice sentences contain subjects that are the object of the sentence's verb. So for example, if we said, the roadway was trampled when the moose ran over it, maybe that's a more passive voice sentence because the subject that we start with, the road, is not really the subject of the verb. We really want to talk about a moose running across the street. So to do that in active voice, we need to start with the moose and then go to the verb. Okay. They're not the doer of the sentence, they're the recipient of the action. Sentences constructed with the active voice generally use fewer words and are easier to understand. So that's good advice. Active voice sentences, easier to understand. Number 2, use strong verbs. If you want to revise a sentence to make it better, start by looking for a stronger verb. If you choose a verb that accurately describes the action of a scene, you can cut down on modifying words you might otherwise need to better explain that action. Precise, strong verbs get to the point, which is great for word economy. I agree with this. What I would add is what you want to do is you want verbs that are very unambiguous. And in my experience, the best way to have an unambiguous verb is to think about what is the measurable objective of your sentence. So, for example, where I work, there's an epidemic of people using the verb drive. You know, they'll say something like, Stephen is driving technology XYZ. And when you actually sit down and think about it, the use of the verb drive in this context of doing work or talking about something that isn't driving a car or using a golf club driver or driving a nail into something with a nail gun is really ambiguous. If I say Stephen is driving technology XYZ, what does that even mean? How do I know at the end of the day if Stephen is done or not? I have no idea. So this is a needlessly ambiguous verb. What you can do instead is try to figure out what the measurable objective of the sentence or the concept that you're trying to communicate is really trying to do. So for example, if I have an employee and they are doing a study where they are going to compare technology A to technology B and tell me which one is better, maybe one is higher performance. What I really want at the end of the day is I want that employee to have a PowerPoint presentation and maybe present it to my larger team. So what I want that employee to do is publish a PowerPoint presentation and present it or review it with a particular work group at work. I don't need my employee to drive a comparison of technology. That doesn't mean anything. I can't tell if it's done or not. What I really need is that employee to do something more measurable. Publish the PowerPoint presentation and present it to a particular audience. These are measurable objectives. And once you know what the measurable objective is, the verb that goes along with that objective becomes kind of trivial to identify. So that's my advice there. Let's move to number 3. Avoid wordy prepositional phrases. So what does this mean? A lot of inexperienced writers weigh down their prose with prepositional phrases without adding further meaning. So instead of writing, he ran in the style of someone who is a professional athlete, just say he ran like a professional athlete. So the idea here is, you want to condense the sentence so that the reader only has to think about certain things. So for example, if I say a professional athlete, I might say, okay, Michael Phelps, he's a professional swimmer, Olympic athlete. I understand who he is. I know sort of what he does. He's won gold medals swimming. If you say he ran in the style or he swam in the style of Michael Phelps, what does that mean? What is Michael Phelps' style? Now I have to sit there and think as the reader like, okay, I know who Michael Phelps is, but do I know what his style is? What does that mean? So really what you're trying to do here is just focus on the key information, the real details that somebody needs to understand your sentence. So, he ran like a professional athlete. He swam like Michael Phelps. Much easier to understand. Okay, let's move along. Use the English dictionary and thesaurus effectively. Some young writers mistakenly believe that making a phrase longer will make it seem smarter. In reality, the opposite is true. Economical word choice helps make your prose more fluid and clear. So use the dictionary and thesaurus. Okay, so this is pretty good because sometimes we may be trying to think of some concept and we're not quite sure the best word, there could be a single word that describes the whole thing, and we either need a dictionary or a thesaurus to find it. Sometimes if you can think of something that is similar to what you want to express and use a thesaurus, you can find the better word. I've seen this happen, especially when making YouTube thumbnails, for example. If you're trying to keep the text on the thumbnail very concise, a thesaurus can sometimes help do that. Or you can find a word with fewer letters. Let's see, is there a good example I have from the real world? So where I work, there's a period in time where executives were trying to use a particular word, which I won't say here, but they were trying to use a particular word to describe sort of a cultural aspect of the company. And when I looked up this word in the dictionary, what I found was that there were two definitions in common use. One was related to geography, so it didn't really have anything to do with the business culture that the executives were trying to describe at all. And the second definition was very suitable for something like a steamy romance novel, which of course in the corporate world, that has no bearing or place in conversation. So I was very confused about their constant attempt to try and introduce this terminology into our corporate vocabulary when there were alternative words that you could find in a thesaurus or a dictionary that would perhaps convey the meaning better using words that are already defined. Now, keep in mind, language is descriptive and it's not prescriptive. So you can't really say, well, the dictionary says this, so you have to do something a certain way. There's no rule. This is why people start making up new words that enter into the vocabulary over time. And other words leave our vocabulary over time. In ancient times, people used terminology and slang that we don't use today. And today we use terminology and slang that nobody 100, 200 years ago or more would ever have used. That's fine, because language is descriptive instead of prescriptive. But when you are trying to focus on the economy of words, it is far, far better to use words that already exist rather than trying to invent some new terminology or slang and force it upon your audience. Okay, let's go to number 5. Number 5, have individual scenes accomplish multiple things? Introduce a character by writing a short scene, place your character in a situation that both advances your story and provides character development. Okay, so in terms of management practices or workplace practices, I don't know if this one's very applicable. It may be possible to create an economy of words by talking about two things at once that are related, as long as they're related. I think when you are in a business environment, talking to employees, talking to your manager, it's far better to focus on one thing at a time. One thing I've seen a lot in the workplace that sort of goes contrary to this item, you can send an email to someone with 2 questions in it. And a lot of times what I see is someone will do that, and then somebody will reply and answer one of those 2 questions. And it's like, well, now who's going to answer the second question? Or do we need to start all over again? Or what's going on here? So I think in terms of economy of words, if you can condense multiple pieces of relevant information into one email or one sentence or one PowerPoint presentation, that's great, as long as it's very related. Otherwise, if you're trying to deal with a complicated subject, just focus on one thing at a time. Even if it takes longer. Now let's see, number 6, keep characters lean. Make sure each chapter has a purpose that ties into the bigger story. Don't fluff up the novel with irrelevant content. Establish trust with your reader that you will not waste their time with authorial indulgences. Exactly. So for example, I was talking to someone once that I remember, and they were telling me something that they had learned. And I'll just make up sort of a story that's similar to what they were telling me, but it's kind of different. Let's say that what they were trying to tell me was that they had a high school friend who just opened a new restaurant in town. Now, I just explained that sort of succinctly, or as succinctly as I could. And if I was trying to tell someone that, that's probably what I would say. I had a friend from high school, and gosh, they just opened up a new restaurant in town. Maybe I can't wait to go there. But in this case, the person proceeded to tell me a longer story full of details that were kind of irrelevant. So maybe they said something like, oh, when I was in high school and I was taking math class, we had to test into the math classes. So different grades would take different classes all at the same time. So there was someone in my math class who was a year behind me named Steven. And he sat behind me, so we became friends. And we went through math class together. And that was X number of years ago. And I don't know what he's been doing since then, but I thought I saw on Facebook that he was a cook or a chef. But just today, I learned that he opened a new restaurant on the other side of town. And I thought that was very interesting because he had been a chef for so long, and now he has his own restaurant. And so it took so much longer to get to the point when you don't keep your writing or your conversation lean. You really need to focus on the key thing you want the other person to take away from it. It's almost like when somebody has a strange dream at night and the next day they're trying to explain it to someone because maybe it's a very bizarre dream. And usually these things get really weird and rambly, like, well, I was swimming underwater, but I could breathe. And then I turned into a manatee. And then we swam along, and then we were in a car, and your sister was there, and I talked to your sister about coconuts. And you're like, what does any of this have to do? What do I need to remember out of this conversation? Any of this? Is any of it relevant? Is any of it a key takeaway? I just don't know. So if your writing style or your conversation style starts to sound like the recapping of a dream, which is a bunch of stuff that basically probably has no meaning other than arbitrary interpretation, that's a red flag that you need to tighten up the writing and focus on the economy of words. Let's go to number 7. Number 7 says, plan your narrative and stick with the plan. In a thriller, people want to be on the edge of their seat. This requires narrative focus. Don't meander too far from your main storyline. That is, from all the scenes and dialogue that develop your stakes. This is very good. I think this reminds me of when you're at work. One of the things I see a lot is people can work overtime or maybe burn themselves out or work too many hours by doing something that's technically not their job. Or maybe they don't know precisely what their job should be and when it should end. And a lot of companies will give you more work than you can handle in a given work week. And you will quickly burn out if you do this. So one strategy I recommend is to write down exactly what is a job charter for you and your team. What are a person's roles and responsibilities? What are a team or an individual's receivables and deliverables? So what do they create? Who do they give that to? What do they need to receive from someone else in order to do their job? And then really anything outside of that bounding box is not their job. So for example, if my job is, I'm a park ranger and I have to go count the moose, how many moose there are, maybe, the arborists who come in and trim some trees, like that's their job. And if I'm the park ranger and I have to keep track of the bears and the moose and the antelopes or something and count them, like that's my job. And that's an easy example, but these things can get real fuzzy real fast. So I would say in writing, be very clear about, number 1, what are you going to do? Number 2, you would go off and do that thing, do the work. And then number 3, document that you did that work. So basically, this is in alignment with the idea to plan your narrative. So if you're writing a fictional book, you need to have an outline. If you're managing a team at work or working at a job, you need to know what your job is. You need an outline as well, just like a writer would for a fiction book. So I think it's very analogous. Let's go to number 8. In number 8, compress your dialogue. You should keep dialogue economical in the same way you do with your prose. Unless your character is naturally verbose, tighten up their language, conveying only the information that will deepen the character or move the story forward. Making people seem real on the page means giving them shorter sentences. Yeah. Many people are naturally, in conversation, you just say, I'm going to go over there. You don't have this big, long, wandering sentence of dialogue in real life. So that's true. I'm not sure how to relate this to a management best practice other than the idea that goes back to difficult conversations. Sometimes compressing your dialogue, you can use this in the real world. If you're a more senior person in a meeting at work, you should probably listen to everybody else in the meeting first before you start giving your 2 cents or telling people what to do. Get all the input first, because otherwise you may intimidate everybody else in the room from speaking. You may swamp out other good ideas that more junior people might have. And there's the old adage, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion. So you should be listening twice as often as you're talking when working or in meetings with other people or talking to your employees. Let's see. Let's go to number 9. Avoid info dumping. Okay, well, that's kind of what I'm doing in this video today, but what can we do? We're already here. Beginning writers tend to drop large chunks of information onto the page all at once. This is called info dumping, and not only does it bore readers, but it stops the momentum cold. You want to make your information feel natural and interesting. Avoid the dreaded info dump by having your characters discover information in the course of a conversation. This is very good. I think where I work, when people make things like PowerPoint presentations, they will try to jam-pack every slide full of information until it becomes like you got to have 20/20 vision or better. What is it? Better than 20/20 vision to read the eye chart, right, at the eye doctor. And that's what people do to these PowerPoint presentations. And that's basically info dumping. And what you really want to do is you want to use the PowerPoint to highlight the key concepts at a very high level with an economy of words, to focus the discussion. And then when you're talking about it, you can speak extemporaneously. You can have material in the backup. You can have links to other Word documents that have much more information in them. You can have a conversation, and in the course of the questions and answers, you can get into all the other information that would have otherwise been in an eye chart type of jam-packed PowerPoint. So that's my advice there. And let's go to number 10. Okay. Compress, compress, compress. Go through your writing and see how many words you can cut out while keeping the original feel of your work. Yeah. This is why editorial passes are very important on documents or even videos or TikTok videos that you might want to make. If you do it a second time or even a third time, even if you don't have it written down, you will probably be a little tighter in the delivery of your content, whether it's written or verbal. Now, they have a hint here that I think is very good to watch out for adverbs. And adverbs are these words that usually end in ly, usually. That's funny. Like gently or beautifully, okay? Yeah. And the other thing that's interesting about this from a business perspective is these adverbs are often qualitative, not quantitative. So for example, if I say, my team worked quickly and we hit a deadline, so give us an award. The quickly doesn't tell me anything. It's really ambiguous. And also the key thing in that sentence is that my team hit a deadline. So if you want to focus on economy of words, that's what you need to focus on. The team hit the deadline. If you really need to highlight how quickly they worked, you can potentially do it with quantitative data. So for example, my team closed 12 bugs per month. Okay. And maybe that is an increase over last year or last month where maybe they only closed 8 bugs per month. So if you get quantitative about it, you can have some good information, maybe keep that information in the backup. and focus on the message you really want to convey without all these adverbs. Adverbs are the first and easiest things to remove out of a bunch of writing that you have. That is for sure. They also say beware of places where you've given too much description. Yeah, and I'm guilty of this too. I will take a bunch of adjectives and stack them up. You know, if you see a bunch of commas with a bunch of adjectives, that's often a sign that, maybe you're in a heated emotional state and you want to say, this is terrible, this is horrible, this is a travesty. It sounds like a good speech, but in terms of economy of words for writing or having a calm conversation, you don't need all of that. One word will do. And that's what they say here. One powerful detail about a building will often do the trick rather than a whole paragraph describing the building. Yeah, and I agree with that. Okay. And then there are some other things in here. But I saw this list and I thought it related well to the concepts that I was thinking about from work, as well as the events that have happened recently with the court case we've been looking at, with some of the stories Dave Neal from the Rush Hour podcast has been putting out. And these have been 10 tips for improving the word economy of your writing. Not just for your writing, it could be for anything you create, whether it's music or prose, graphic design, management work, technical documents, anything. All right. So I am Bruce Morgan. This is the Bruce Morgan Show, and I will catch you next time with another exciting topic. All right. Talk to y'all later.